introduction. My name is James Padillione Jr., and I am the Vice Chairman of North American Executive Board of Students for Liberty, and I'm also a member of the International Executive Board with Students for Liberty. And so this panel, if you already have seen the description, you probably know why you've shown up here, but in case you are not sure why you're here, we're going to be talking about ways to position the libertarian message to non-traditional libertarian audiences, and that's a nice way of saying people of color, women, LGBT audiences, so people who you don't normally see at libertarian conferences, correct? So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves briefly, and then we're going to kick this off with one question to frame why we even feel this panel is necessary and what we recognize as the problem or what the areas for development are within libertarian rhetoric and strategy, and then we'll position some strategies that we've worked on to actually address that moving forward. So, start with you.
Hello, my name is Bilal Bahadur. I'm a campus coordinator for Students for Liberty. I go to Seattle University in New Jersey, originally from Egypt, born to a Palestinian father. And I will speak about Palestine and the plight of the Palestinians and why it's important and why it's an important libertarian issue.
My name is J.L. Ahram. I'm an Iraq War veteran writer. I go to the University of Southern California. I'll be talking about basically libertarianism and what is the problem, just identify some of the problems that's inherent in mainstream libertarianism.
My name is Barbie Sestaida. I'm a member of the exec board for SFL. I'm also a Latina immigrant, and I'm a former undocumented student. I am going to talk about issues facing immigrant communities in this country and from other sources.
Hello everyone, my name is Ludwig. I'm from Costa Rica. I study political science at the University of Costa Rica. And I'm also a member of the executive board of Estudiantes por la Libertad. And well, my goal is to try to bring a little Latino perspective over here as well, and maybe some solutions to make liberalism popular.
My name is Tawai Baislo. I'm a campus coordinator at Students for Liberty, and today I'd like to talk about why libertarianism fails in inner city communities, specifically the Black community.
I'm Donnelly Rodriguez. I am a campus coordinator in New York City for SFL as well. I'm first generation American. My parents came from the Dominican Republic, so I'll just give you a brief background. But I'll just be touching on, I guess, sort of like a holistic solution for kind of broadening the libertarian perspective into welcoming different type of cultures into the discussion.
So I guess just since everyone else was throwing out their background, right? So my family's Black, Italian, Puerto Rican. I was born in Puerto Rico. So I feel like I have one foot in Latin America, one foot in North America, culturally and physically a lot of times. So, so the first kind of open-ended question, we're gonna let a conversation develop around this question for about 15 minutes before we transition to the next one. But what is the reason for a panel like this? You know, a philosophy like libertarianism that stresses individual rights doesn't necessarily, maybe you might think it doesn't necessarily need to define itself any further beyond just respect the rights of an individual. So why are we paying attention to these identity issues relative to libertarianism? What do you think, J.L.?
Yeah. So one thing I forgot to mention in my introduction that for a while I lived in abject poverty in the Philippines. My sister and I were illegally in the Philippines, so we're American citizens illegally in the Philippines for like 8 years. So that's kind of twist on the whole immigration issue. But to answer, to kind of begin this discussion regarding libertarianism is the main problem, not main problem, it's one of the problems of mainstream libertarianism that our thought leaders come from the same exact demographic. You know, I mean, I'm gonna say it's explicitly white, male, well-to-do, very academic, and that's not, you know, it's not a condemnation of where they're coming from, but it's a perspective that's from liberty. People who are already enjoying liberty. When you try to translate that kind of perspective into a community that just merely existing, are already oppressed or experience oppression from the state. You know, that's a very difficult. There is that barrier. you know, libertarians like to talk about a cradle to grave welfare state, right? Why is it we don't talk about cradle to grave oppression? You know, if you're in these neighborhoods, for example, just as soon as you go to school, you're experiencing the oppressive hand of the state. Libertarianism, as a, you know, the title of this panel is Libertarianism as Liberation. The idea of using libertarianism to liberate people from the state is something that is missing from libertarian discourse. We don't think about liberation because we think of it as, oh, I'm already free. It's like that porcupine, right? The porcupine that you see as the mascot of libertarianism. I hate that porcupine. You have no idea. Because what it means, I call it porcupine libertarianism. Because it means it's like, oh, I can just go doing, like, these are basically a porcupine libertarianism. A libertarian is a libertarian who is not being oppressed by the state, but who can defend themselves, you know? But what's happening in this community is that we're like naked mole rats. Okay, we're already being oppressed. We're already in cages. Okay, that's the difference between porcupine libertarianism and people who are in these communities, right? And let's just talk about the whole, just one specific issue, like the welfare state, right? Why is it that when we talk about people who are in welfare, we always couch it in terms of parasitic, you know, welfare recipients and the victimized state? Since when do libertarians couch? But we do that. That's the messaging. Is that these parasitic, marginalized communities are sucking the teeth of government, as if the government is the one who's the victim. You know, we don't talk about how, for example, you know, in return for food stamps, that the state give itself permission to lock up our brothers and sisters and put them in jail. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about how, in return for free public housing, the state gives itself permission to brutalize our kids and disarm our communities so that the police can declare open season for that on them. You know, when we talk about what else? Public education, free public education and lunches. You know, we don't see it as the state giving itself permission to send our children in this pipeline to you know, from school to prison pipeline. And that's the problem with libertarianism, is that we need to start thinking those terms, not as people who are already free, but people who are being actively oppressed. We can't talk about liberty if we assume that people are know what it looks like. So that's
I would like to mainly speak about one thing in particular, and that is in Manhattan there is the Upper East Side, which is one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. And if you take the 456 line on the Upper East Side, very interesting to watch what happens. Interesting in a bad way, mostly. You get on, I'd say, Midtown around the 20s, the demographic is pretty white, mostly white people. There are people of color, but mostly white people at that point. And by the time you get to 76th, 86th Street, everything completely changes. You go across the river, and it's the poorest congressional district in the country. Hunts Point actually has tons of abandoned warehouses where people live in there. All of them are almost heroin addicts. It's a horrible place, lots of crime. They're not bad people, but this is just the way things are. Now, reality is perception of what you think things are, despite what people like to think. And for someone who's very poor, very not well off, and you live on the other side of Park Avenue, and you go down on the 456 line, you think that people are probably just cheating to get their wealth. Or maybe you don't, maybe you actually respect the fact that they worked hard. Maybe they didn't, who knows? The point I'm trying to illustrate is that libertarians, whenever they try to speak about that, say, well, no, the free market did this and they got that money because they deserved it, and you have to understand that. And it's like beating against a wall sometimes because someone who isn't as educated, who doesn't have the opportunity to go to school, the opportunity to hear about these things, whether or not they're true, regardless or not, you can't frame your perception of reality in the same way that they do. And they can't do the same as you do. So you're beating against this wall with them. And then sometimes some libertarians just say, well, then you're just stupid. You don't understand what this is. We don't need to talk to you. You're just a statist. Like you said, you're just a parasite. We can't speak with you and you're the enemy. Now, that is affirming the stereotype of a very offensive, racist, white libertarian. Not saying that that's all the ways that libertarians communicate to people of color. But whether or not you were intending to actually be disparaging towards that person, the fact that you're doing everything and creating the same effect as a racist person affirms the stereotype. So there's inherently a resistance to it. It's the same way why you can run into a very poor urban city and run a Democratic candidate. But if you run a Republican candidate, there's automatically an association with racism, which is affirmed by the fact that when you bring up something like the right to discriminate against someone in your own place of public property, you may not be a racist when you say that. I'm not saying that you are. But the fact that you're saying, well, no, you can discriminate. There's a black person, you don't want a lemon in your restaurant, you have the right to do that. You have to understand how that's being perceived. I mean, it's completely ridiculous to say that if a black person said to you, well, I don't want to serve you because you're white, that you would not turn around and say, well, maybe you might say he has the right to do that, but you say that was a very bigoted opinion of his. I didn't do anything to him, I just walked into the restaurant. But it's different for a person who isn't of color because you can go almost anywhere and not be discriminated against. It's different for the person who lives on welfare, who has to use food stamps, who has to work multiple jobs. It's much different. And for you, if you get discriminated against, and I'm not pointing that at anyone, like I said, it doesn't matter. You can go anywhere you want, any country, you can fit in pretty well. And that's not the same.
And especially the idea of intersectionality is something that's very important that libertarians don't usually acknowledge. It's your life experiences are based on the intersection of all of your identities. If you are a poor, black, queer woman, imagine the difference with the opposite, a wealthy, white, straight man. We have these intersectional identities, and they affect both how we perceive the world and how the world perceives us. And so for a lot of minority communities, their liberation is tied up with the liberation of those who are like them. For me, my liberation is tied up in the liberation of my Latino community, of my sisters, of my female sisters. And we often think that community is inherently bad, or we shun away from the collective, right? We make a big difference between individual and collective. And there's a poem that says it's the poem for the white man who asked me how I, as an educated Latina woman, could believe that there is discrimination in this world. He doesn't see the discrimination, and he sees, how can she as an educated woman sense this discrimination? But it's because they don't have the same life experiences. And I really think that we need to step back and analyze how others perceive the world and how others perceive their position in the world. A lot of the times we say that capitalism is so great, but my experiences with capitalism may not be the same experiences with you as capitalism. I might look at capitalism differently. Cooperative economics is a really important principle in the African tradition. And cooperative economics means working together for our cooperative prosperity, for all of our prosperity, for all of our progress. And things don't look the same around the world, which is why Asdrubal is on this panel too. We're not just talking about American liberation, or male liberation, or black liberation, or female liberation. We're saying that libertarianism as liberation is for everyone.
Yeah, actually, that's right, and I think this is like the best point to start, because when I was invited to this panel, for example, James told me, we're going to try to speak about how to approach minorities from liberalism, and we want like a Latino perspective in a way. The thing is that I'm a Latino, of course, but I live in a region where the color of your skin is not a problem, specifically in countries that demographically are well represented, while you may be considered a minority in the United States. For example, the Caribbean or Latin, Caribbean countries, or even Costa Rica, just the demographic division of people is not a matter of consideration. The thing is, and this is why I see liberalism more like a liberation of individuals and a specific group, is something that Hayek said in a famous speech in Dublin. I think it was like in '86, where he talked about false individualism and the real individualism. There was a misconception after the French Revolution, when the reivindication of the individual, when they tried to cut every human bond of the French society just to reinvent themselves. This is a misconception, Hayek says, because actually as individuals, we are involved with our environment, and that's the reason why the society, the civil society exists, and we shouldn't depend specifically on the state. And I think this is a very strong conception in Latin America to talk about liberalism, because in this case it's not like the pigment of your skin, it is like your ideas and where you were born. And in this case, liberalism, the problem is that it is built like a black, like a white American expansionist ideals, and being in Latin America has a lot to do with being a socialist as well. For example, just for you to know, there's so strong conceptions in the Mayan culture before Spain invaded Latin America. That made all that convention. Like the absence of the word property, because the way society was built, it was like in a socialist scheme. So when people talk about, and that's how to like some solutions in this topic, not just profanizing the problems. How to beat go back to the roots in Latin America, where the roots are basically socialism, right? And libertarians like to talk a lot about empiric evidence, right? And we say like, well, the empiric evidence shows that economic freedom works, and we have over here the index, and these are like more free countries in the world and everything. We think sometimes that it might help. I mean, it may help some those people, as you said, for example, to get like an educational background, so may take this information or pieces of information to create a criteria. But there's a lot of people that is not going to believe that. And a good example of this is Chile right now. Chile has a lot of economic freedom, a lot of economic, liberty rights. And it's a very, very good country if you analyze the numbers in how people live in Chile. And despite that, there's empiric evidence in this country, people just decide as society to turn to the left again. So here's the solution. I mean, the solution definitely is a generational change that it needs to start from universities and in our generation. That's the goal we have. We have a problem, we create like kind of an aristocratic society, libertarian society, and we lose the perspective that there's a lot of other groups represented in society as well that we need to approach. And our goal is to make liberalism popular. And I think that guy who maybe may consider himself as a socialist, as I was one time, we need to approach them because, and with this I'm going to close. There was something, because we have our own academics, and that's something very funny about Latin America, that we cite like famous phrases, we don't even use phrases from American founders, something like that. Jose Piñera, who is the architect of the pension system in Chile, once told me, because I asked him, how do you do to manage to create so a libertarian public policy in that society? And he told me, when you defend an honest idea, there's nothing to fear about. So guys, let's beat the fear to get to those spaces, those social spaces, and start promoting freedom in a very popular way.
I think just one thing that I'll add in on this, and then I think we're going to try to transition out to ways to move forward from this point. But a lot of what you were saying, if you're hearing what everyone's saying on the panel, you're referring to a lot of specific things historically, or like the specific context of either the United States or of liberalism in South America or Central America. A lot of times, libertarianism as an idea or as a theory stays at the level of theory and doesn't really get to the level of history. And when you look at the histories of how these ideas develop in certain contexts, in certain places, so in the United States context, libertarianism as a cohesive political philosophy comes of age in the 20th century during the Cold War, but at the same time as Jim Crow too, right? And you have a lot of the rhetoric on both sides mixes together sometimes, where you have people who support anti-Cold War strategies who are also anti-civil rights, because a lot of the civil rights movement was being associated with communism, even if it wasn't necessarily the case, or they were playing to that edge just because they were using it as a kind of a tool or strategy against. And same with Latin America. I know at least classical liberalism in Haiti and in the Caribbean, Haiti as a classical liberal republic got no attention from other classical liberal republics in the early 19th century, and they were actually no trade agreements. Even the United States was not engaged in any trade agreements with Haiti for the first 60 years of their life because they were afraid of doing business with an ex-slave country, while these other European countries and the United States still had slavery. And so even the best liberals at the time were hesitant. So all the historical context influences the memories that certain people carry. And that these memories live in our families. You know, there are family stories that are not the same. The founding fathers, they're not my founding fathers. It's not, you know, none of my family's founding fathers were here in the 1700s doing anything like that in the United States, right? That's not my people. And so just that the theory and the history, they can sometimes come together, but a lot of times they stay separate. Theory stays off the ground. And we're trying to be a little bit more grounded in the way we talk about libertarian theory, because the theories are the theories, but how do those theories apply in different contexts and in different places? So some strategies are some things that we've been doing to bring the level of libertarian theory and to push it into the 21st century, to push it into a millennial, young approach to libertarianism that Students for Liberty has taken on as its mantle. So I know, Bilal, you want to talk to that point, and that Natalie has some cool things that he's been doing, and we'll just let that side of the conversation develop now.
So I'll introduce the answer to James's question, and I'll speak a little bit about the issue of Palestine also. So my personal idea, and this is off of Barbara's point about intersectionality, is introducing a term called libertarian intersectionality. And what that is the need to voluntarily recognize that any type of racism, discrimination, or oppression is unacceptable, whether committed by individual or group, and that staying silent on these issues that we are complicit in should be acted upon. So that's just a call for realizing that there is some type of injustice happening, and we are in some type of way participating in it, even if it's just by paying taxes. So going from there, the issue of historic Palestine, I think, should be an important issue to libertarians for many reasons. One, there's mass property private property being taken away from Palestinians, and that happened, you can trace it back from its historical context, 1948, the British mandate, and everything that comes with that. And then you can follow through 4 million Palestinians dispersed all over the world, 4 million plus. And they still can't get back their property that they were once forced out of by the Israeli government or by the colonial entities that made that stuff happen. So now, we go for this as a historical context happening all the way to 1948. Even some people can argue that it happens since biblical times. And I'm not here to argue rhetoric. I'm not here to get into the debate of the Palestine issue or Israeli issue. I'm not interested in that. But I am interested in recognizing that the injustice is still happening today. And Palestinians are still being, getting their land taken away from them every single day. My family lives in Gaza. And Gaza is in a 2-year warning where it can go into drought because they can't have any type of transfers of water and into it. And this is not only Israel that's acting upon this, and this is not only America that's funding this. Egypt, for example, is blocking it from the Rafah border from Gaza, blocking Palestinians that work in Egypt, that make most of their money through going into Egypt and going back to Gaza, from the access to their families or back to their workplace. Jordan, for example, gave all the waterways, and it's being complicit in the injustice that's happening there. Syria, the Yarmouk refugee camp. This is something that needs to be recognized. People are starving to death right now, as we speak. We over here are eating our nice big dinner place and our nice luncheons, and people are starving to death. Hunger is still an issue in this country, or even in this world. And we are in the 21st century. So saying that, we need to recognize that a lot of injustices are happening. And as libertarians, we need to make this a universal thing, that this is a problem. That this is something that we are actors in just by living, just by being present in this world. And I feel like we should put a lot of scholarship and a lot of historical